Ever feel like you're just drowning in information? You know there's important stuff in there, even fascinating stuff, but it's just overwhelming.
Yeah, totally. Like, where do you even start?
Exactly, and that's why we do these deep dives, to take these huge topics and break them down into something we can actually think about.
Yeah, find those golden nuggets right. Make it worth the effort.
And today, we are tackling a pretty big one, Sun Tzu's Art of War.
Hmm.
But before you think, oh no, not another war book, I gotta tell you, this goes way beyond the battlefield.
Oh, absolutely. It's really about strategy, like pure strategy. You can apply it to business, relationships, even personal growth.
And isn't it kind of wild that something written so long ago is still relevant today?
It really is. Leaders, CEOs, even athletes are still learning from this book. It's crazy how timeless these principles are.
Before we jump into all that, though, we got to talk about the mystery around this book. We don't even know for sure who Sun Tzu was.
Right. Some people even think Sun Tzu, the name itself, might be like a metaphor.
Introducing Some Books, the new generation of podcasts. Subscribe now to stay updated with our latest content.
I read that too, comparing it to someone who had their feet cut off. It's definitely intriguing.
It kind of adds to the whole strategy thing, don't you think? Like, it makes you question everything.
Yeah, it's like the book itself is playing a game with us right from the start.
Makes it even more interesting, though, trying to figure it all out.
All right, so let's get into some of the big ideas in the art of war. One that really stands out is Sun Tzu's focus on planning, on not just jumping into things.
Right, like he said, the general who loses a battle makes but few calculations beforehand.
So it's all about thinking things through, not just going with your gut.
Yeah, taking the time to really understand the situation. What are the risks? What are your options? What's your opponent going to do? All that. It's about having a solid plan, not just winging it.
So this next idea might seem a little weird at first, but Sun Tzu was big on deception, using indirect maneuvers to get an advantage.
Yeah, like pretending to be weak to lure your opponent in. He compares it to, get this, a grindstone dashed against an egg.
I love that image. So it's really about using psychology.
Absolutely, it's like psychological warfare. You got to get in your opponent's head, make them think you're vulnerable, then bam, you hit them when they least expect it.
Like a chess game.
Exactly. Always thinking a few steps ahead, setting traps. And you can use this in so many situations, not just war. Like, think about negotiating a deal or even just having a tough conversation. Understanding how people perceive things is huge.
So we've got planning, we've got deception, but Sun Tzu also talks a lot about being adaptable, about going with the flow. He's got this great line, water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions.
It's beautiful, right, but also super smart. Things change all the time. You can't be stuck with just one plan.
So you got to be able to read the situation and change your approach if things aren't working.
Exactly, like water flowing around a rock, finding a new path. And this is so important today. The world changes so fast. You got to be able to adapt or you get left behind.
So don't be afraid to let go of the plan if you have to.
Right. Being stubborn, being too rigid, that's a recipe for disaster.
Okay, now this next idea, I think it really speaks to a lot of people. Sun Tzu said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, your victory will not stand in doubt. If you know heaven and know earth, you may make your victory complete.
Such a simple statement, but there's so much packed into it. It's not just about knowing your strengths and weaknesses and your opponents, but also about understanding the bigger picture, the heaven and earth of the situation.
So like taking into account everything that might affect the outcome.
Right, like market trends, social norms, even just the physical environment you're in. All these things matter.
It's like playing chess, you got to know the board, not just the pieces.
Exactly. You got to see the whole game, not just your little corner of it.
So knowing yourself, your opponent, and the context you're both operating in, that's real strategic mastery.
That's it. That's how you make the best decisions and really increase your chances of success.
All right, so we've covered a lot. Planning, deception, adaptability, and really knowing yourself and the situation. But there's one more big piece of the art of war we got to talk about.
And it's a big one. We're going to dive into the ethical side of all this, something that Sun Tzu took very seriously. So yeah, Sun Tzu, he wasn't just some brilliant warlord. The guy was a philosopher too, really thought about the moral side of all this.
Yeah, and he really believed that war, it should be the last resort. And if you have to fight, make it quick, make it decisive, minimize the suffering.
Exactly. War is destructive, right? He knew that. He wanted to find a way to win, but also preserve life to get to a lasting peace.
So it's not about just crushing your enemy or conquering for the sake of conquering. It's more like recognizing that conflict is going to cost something and trying to keep that cost as low as possible.
Yeah, he saw how long wars just drain everyone, destroy morale, hurt both sides. It's like, what's the point? Better to find a way to end it fast. Everyone suffers less that way.
It's interesting, though, right? Because today, we see conflicts dragging on forever. But Sun Tzu, he's like, no, the real victory is ending it as quickly as possible.
It's about finding a way to peace, even when you're fighting. And honestly, we can use that idea in our own lives, right? Like when we have disagreements with people at work, with family, whatever. The goal should be to find a solution that works for everyone and causes the least amount of damage.
I like that. So strategy isn't just about beating the other person. It's about finding the best outcome for everyone.
Exactly. It's about taking responsibility, thinking about the consequences, and always, always trying to find a peaceful way through it.
So we've covered a ton here. Planning, deception, adapting to the situation, knowing yourself and your opponent, even the bigger picture, the heaven and earth stuff. But what about you? What are some things you've personally taken away from the art of war? What's really stuck with you?
Good question. I think for me, the biggest thing is just learning to see the world through that strategic lens, realizing that every situation, every interaction, there's a strategic element to it. We're making strategic decisions all the time, whether we realize it or not.
So it's not just for like generals and CEOs. This stuff applies to everyday life.
Oh, yeah, totally. It's about thinking ahead, anticipating problems, trying to see things from different perspectives, and that helps you make better choices, whatever you're doing.
I love that. It's like we can all become more strategic thinkers, not just in big moments, but just in everyday life.
Exactly. And the other thing that's really important, and Sun Tzu talks about this a lot, is self-awareness. Knowing yourself, that's the foundation of everything.
Makes sense. If you don't even know yourself, how can you know anyone else, right?
Right. You got to understand your own strengths and weaknesses, what you're good at, what you struggle with. That's how you make good decisions.
This has been an amazing conversation. We've really dug deep into the art of war. It's amazing how much wisdom is packed into this book and how relevant it still is today. But before we wrap things up, I want to throw out a challenge to everyone listening. Remember how Sun Tzu talks about knowing your enemy?
Yeah, super important.
Think about that idea, but apply it to something you're dealing with right now. It could be a problem at work, something personal you're struggling with, even a bad habit you're trying to break. Try to look at it strategically.
Right. Think about that enemy not as a person you're fighting, but as the thing you're trying to overcome.
Exactly. Ask yourself, why is this happening? What are the strengths and weaknesses on each side, including your own side? And how can you use that knowledge to get a better result?
It's about taking control, becoming a more strategic thinker, and finding the best way to move forward.
So keep thinking about this. Keep exploring these ideas. The art of war, it's full of wisdom that can really help you navigate the world no matter what you're facing.
And if you like what we're doing here, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future deep dives. We're always looking for interesting topics, challenging ideas, things that make you think.
So join us as we keep learning and exploring together.
We'll see you next time.
We love hearing what you guys are thinking, what you're taking away from all this.
Yeah, it's amazing how many different perspectives there are.
And it helps us learn, too. So keep those comments coming. Keep challenging yourselves to think strategically, in your own lives.
Because that's what it's all about, right? Sun Tzu, he wasn't just writing about war, he was writing about life.
Exactly. And we hope this deep dive has given you some tools to, really think about those challenges, find those better solutions.
Like we always say, knowledge is power.
Absolutely. So keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.